Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me to chat about creating a culture of code ownership. I'll start off by introducing myself and sharing a bit about my background, then give you a quick intro into Bugsnag and dive into some topics and some practical strategies around creating a culture of code ownership. We have about 25 minutes, which should be a great amount of time to cover this topic. Feel free to connect with me via LinkedIn or hop in. I'm more than happy to field questions that you all have during or after this session. So we can go ahead and get started. For me, I'm Ivan Diaz. I lead our solutions engineering team here at Bugsnag. I started off my career at a small telecom billing startup as one of the very first engineers there. And that's where I became very intimately familiar with bugs and the different tools in the space, and some of the pains that engineers can have when trying to reproduce something, trying to be notified about things and to fix things quickly. Over time, I eventually shifted to a more customer-facing role. At my previous company, I was a very happy Bugsnag user, and then was fortunate enough to join Bugsnag a couple of years ago. In this role, I've had the unique pleasure of working with several of the world's leading engineering organizations, and that gives me the opportunity to spot trends and hear new strategies across different verticals and companies of varying sizes. And one of the topics that continues to come up more and more is the desire to create a culture of accountability and ownership within teams. So there's a lot to unpack there. So I'll be focusing on a couple of aspects of that today, but I wanted to give you a quick intro to Bugsnag for those of you who may not be familiar. So Bugsnag is an error monitoring and application stability management platform. We're helping businesses monitor their applications and provide complete error reporting and analytics to help them decide which bugs to fix and how to fix them. We support over 50 different platforms across mobile, web, and backend. So Bugsnag is a full stack solution with best-in-class functionality for client-side apps. And we're currently monitoring around 95,000 applications or services, recording over 1 billion daily crashes and over 10 billion sessions per day. And we're doing that for the world's leading enterprises in a diverse set of verticals, from e-commerce to the most popular SaaS apps out there to gaming, streaming media, finance, and beyond. So for companies that you're familiar with, like Slack or Pinterest, Square, or Netflix, they're using Bugsnag as their daily dashboard. So that, as promised, was a brief intro into Bugsnag, and now we can dive into today's topic of creating a culture of code ownership. The main things that we're going to be focusing on are these three items here. And these are three things that we believe are necessary for driving and promoting this culture of code ownership. So one thing that you need is some form of a metric. You need a simple, consumable, and objective way to measure the stability of your applications and services so that your teams know when things that they're building may not be quite up to those team standards. And then you need some team alignment, and that's going to be helped by that metric. So you need a metric that the team can rally around and have a target that the team is marching towards that makes sense in achieving your unified goal, which in most cases is going to be an excellent end user experience and user and revenue growth. And then the next item that you need is some form of alerting and workflow automation. So tools that tie seamlessly with the things that you're using today. And that's what I'll focus a good bit of time on, is showing you some ways to notify engineers about what's important to them when necessary, rather than bombarding them with notifications that are losing their importance over time. What we consistently hear is that after a while, engineers are marking emails as spam or leaving or snoozing a Slack channel, and are informed about issues in more reactive ways, whether that be trending on Twitter or getting a large number of Zendesk tickets or support tickets that then trigger the support team to reach out to engineering to see what's happening. And we think that there's a much better way. So we'll start with the metrics and team alignment piece, which we believe go hand in hand. So Bugsnag, for instance, is providing you with the stability score. And in its most simple and general sense, that's going to be your error-free rate. Bugsnag is able to understand how many successful interactions, transactions, requests have been made, as well as how many have ended in a bad experience. And that's the data that we're using to evaluate the stability score. This is what we're providing teams to measure the application or service stability. And that's what's informing engineering organizations on when they can keep sprinting towards shipping new features and when they may need to take a step back and push some roadmap items out in order to stabilize their app in the spirit of protecting their reputation and ultimately revenue. So let me pull up the Stability Center and give you an idea of how different people in the org may use these types of stability metrics, and we'll look at things kind of at a high holistic level as well as for a specific application. So everyone should be able to see one of the main screens of Bugsnag now. This is our Stability Center, and this should be a single pane of glass for understanding which applications or services of yours require attention. Bugsnag is showing you each one of these cards is representing one of your applications or services, and one of the things that should stand out is this indicator here. So we're allowing you to set stability targets. This is what the team should be aligning on. You should have a target stability that the team is incented to achieve. And then you should have a critical stability that tells you, hey, something is really wrong. We need to have a conversation and figure out what could be going wrong. And that's what's driving this indicator of below target, above target. So it's quite easy if you're somebody who is overseeing multiple different applications or services to just scroll through the Stability Center and understand what is above target versus what's below versus what has hit your critical stability target. And then if we take one step deeper and we look at a specific application, we want to make sure that you're understanding how stability is changing release by release. So depending on the type of applications and services that you all are building, this may vary, but in the context of a mobile application where you have weekly or every 2-week release cycles, it's going to be very important to understand how stable your new versions are in comparison to your old versions. And these screens that we're showing you here should help inform you of that. So I can quickly see that our newest version is doing significantly worse and is below our critical stability target in comparison to our other releases. And that should be a signal to us that potentially we need to stop our staged rollout, fix some bugs before we feel comfortable promoting this to our entire user base. So these are some of the stability metrics that we think are relevant in the topic of creating a culture of code ownership, and that will help your teams hit these stability targets and make sure that everyone is agreeing upon their stability targets and focusing on their individual features to hit these targets. So I'm jumping back to the presentation here. So the final piece that we wanted to talk about was alerting and workflow automation. So right now, one of the things that we're seeing is that there's too many alerts demanding and competing for everyone's attention. And these alerts are coming from all of the different tools that we use to do our jobs. And there's tons of tools. You might be receiving alerts from GitHub or Jira or PagerDuty or Slack. And Bugsnag might also be alerting you in addition to those. And then on top of those alerts, most of us are going to be receiving alerts on our phones while we're working. So all of that together is just like too much for anyone to handle. And most likely we're ignoring a pretty good proportion of those. So one of our goals is to improve the signal to noise ratio in a way that's catered to the different personas on the team. So what we need to do is fine tune what we want to be alerted about. And to do that, we need greater control over how our alerts are configured. And fine-tuning those alerts and helping you move away from noisy alerts instead of and receiving a reasonable amount of them makes things more relevant. So you're only receiving alerts that are letting you know of errors that have something to do with a feature that you're working on or that's relevant to the applications that you're working on. And they're actionable, meaning that the alerts have information that help you decide what to do next, whether that's create a Jira ticket from there or whether that's to ping the person responsible for that new feature that went out. That's what your alerts should be able to provide. And we want that to drive the usefulness of your alerts. So I'm going to jump back into Bugsnag and spend some time showing you how to seamlessly integrate with some of the tools that a lot of you all might be familiar with and might be using so that you can target the right people at the right time. So if I pull up Bugsnag again, right now what we're looking at is our inbox view. This is a view that's responsible for helping you prioritize which errors you want to be working on. It's also where a lot of folks go to create searches, and those searches can be saved as bookmarks. And that's one of the concepts we're going to be talking about. These bookmarks are what drive our alerting and workflow automation. So imagine that anything that you can search for here can be saved, and then that's what can be used for triggering alerts, or that's what can be used for automatically creating a Jira ticket. So that's what I plan to cover here. So you can see on this bottom left portion, we have our bookmarks section. I have a few pre-made bookmarks that are already sending events to a Slack workspace that I've set up to help illustrate this better. But you can see we have some team-specific bookmarks. So we have our video team, our photo team, our album team, because this application is called PhotoSnap. So just imagine something like an Instagram or a Snapchat application where we care about things having to do with like the type of camera on the device and things of that nature. We have some product bookmarks, and the reason why this is helpful is we know folks are kind of pivoting to releasing things and decoupling things from new app versions, and instead having like feature management strategies where they're using feature flags, A/B tests, or experimentation. So we find that a lot of engineering organizations will have their product managers create bookmarks for themselves for new features that are going out so that they can be alerted to those types of things. You can even create private bookmarks. Let's say that I'm working on a very specific feature, or I'm adding a set of files and I want to be DM'd when errors happen there so I can be the first to figure out what the issue is and ideally resolve it before it impacts a lot of people. That's something that Bugsnag allows you to do as well. And then a trend that we're seeing more and more is that companies have their, whether you're a B2B company or you're a gaming company, these are use cases where we see this used the most. You might have a set of users or set of clients that make up a large proportion of your company's revenue, and you want to make sure that those folks are having a good experience. And in most cases, you have a team that's responsible for those relationships. So Bugsnag would be able to alert those relationship managers when their customers are having an elevated error rate using your product, and that helps you be proactive even from a customer relationship management perspective. So to walk you through how we can create one of these bookmarks, we have a bunch of different options for you to search by. You can do things like search by release stage, so you may be sending one or many different environments to Bugsnag. In most cases, for these types of alerts that we're talking about, you may want to focus on production. We also allow you to search against releases, so you can focus on all releases in the app or service in a more holistic nature, or you can focus on the latest release or a subset of releases, and we support things like wildcard matches or looking at before or after a specific release. And then one thing that I would say is probably the top search that I see created and saved and used for alerts is errors introduced in your latest release. We all want to make sure that the new versions that we're pushing out are stable. And rather than having to refresh pages and see if there's new errors that appear, Bugsnag can identify new errors that you've never seen before and alert the right folks. We hear that there's like release captains or some rotational group that's responsible for every few releases. So those folks tend to subscribe to one of these channels where these alerts are going to, and they don't feel as if they have to be constantly monitoring these dashboards, and instead can continue working on what they're working on, but be alerted when there's a new issue. There's also severity, so handled and unhandled exceptions. And then beyond that, if you want to add severity tags like error warning or info. And then our search builder is quite powerful. We allow just like freeform text searches. You can search for whatever you'd like here. We're going to search a lot of the index keys that we have, maybe even the frames of the stack trace. But we have a search builder that rather than having you learn a query language, we want to make that more intuitive for you to use. So you can do things like search against all of these pre-indexed fields like error class, message, file name, and method. I see these used a lot for things like understanding team ownership, maybe via file name. Same goes for critical paths. Sometimes, let's say you're working in the e-commerce space, things having to do with checkout or with cart activity are always going to be quite important. So being able to isolate those errors and maybe add a few file names here and create a critical pathways bookmark is something that you may consider. We also have a number of different workflow states that we allow you to search across. There's user information, so you can attach as much user information as you would like. We're just going to anonymize a user identifier, and that's what will populate here out of the box. And then environment-related information like context, OS version, device manufacturer, device model, all of these different things that introduce variance and introduce complexity in trying to figure out what's going wrong in your applications. And then custom filters. So in Bugsnag, you're able to attach custom metadata. You'll see some examples of that here. So active experiments is a pretty important one. We're sending our experiments and which variants people are a part of or subscribe to. And that's helping us understand if we just introduced this new feature to 10% of our users and we're starting to see errors that have a high occurrence of this feature present, then we have a pretty good idea that that's something that we may want to toggle off on the server side and that we want to do some additional investigation for. We also see that folks who have like a subscription model or something like that may want to add things like subscription to this so that you can understand free users versus paid users. Depending on your business, there's going to be different applications for these custom filters, but Bugsnag allows you to index these things, search against them, and then, as you'll see in just a moment, you can create alerts based on that information as well. So I think we should quickly look at some of the different options that we have from an alerting perspective and from an incident management and issue tracker perspective. So the alerting and workflow engine allows you to do things like integrate with Microsoft Teams, with Slack, with Twilio. We also support PagerDuty, OpsGenie. And one thing that I want to make sure that everybody understands is that you can have as many integrations as you'd like. It's not a one-to-one relationship. If you want multiple PagerDuty integrations or multiple Slack integrations, in many cases, we actually recommend that. And then same goes for Jira. And one of the ways that that's really helpful is you can have different rules for how to automatically create different tickets for different Jira boards. So we hear about the concept of squads, or we hear that sometimes something needs to be done on the back end and on the client side, and being able to associate bugs to multiple Jira tickets can be useful. Bugsnag allows you to do all of those things. So I'll show our Slack integration really quickly. You can see when I go to this page, I can configure which channel this is posting to. In my sample workspace, this is posting to our album team Snags channel. And some of the things that I've subscribed to are spike detection. So this is very useful, being able to understand when there's a spike. And this can be either a spike in general across your entire application or service, or it can be something where we've applied an advanced filter. So one of those bookmarks that we just created, in this case, this is for the album team. One of the things that we hear is like search is something that gets used by many people. Most of the time will probably create a lot of errors. And then there's more resilient but high importance areas of the app that don't necessarily trigger spike alerts and other offerings. Bugsnag allows you to apply these advanced filters, and what we'll do is we'll evaluate a moving average. We're going to figure out how many errors we expect to receive that meet this criteria, and only when there's a non-gradual spike in errors that meet this criteria will we alert whatever channel you've associated this with. So you can have very tailored anomaly detection versus very general. And then you can be alerted for things like when new errors occur. So this isn't just every occurrence of an error. This is actually every time that Bugsnag identifies a new error. And then there's the ability to be notified when things are occurring frequently. So you can do things like set a frequency and a time span at which errors become important to you. And we support those basic and advanced filters here as well. And the result of that is Slack integrations that look something like this. So you can see in the example I was showing earlier, I had the My Errors bookmark, and it was tied to this specific file name. So it's DMing me when errors occur here. We have our video team snags. So every error here is happening in the context of our video, and that's important. And then we have our album team snags, which follow kind of the same structure. So rather than having everyone subscribe to a production bugs channel that's getting bombarded from errors that are coming from all over the place, you have everybody subscribe to channels that they're interested in, that they're responsible for, and they then feel accountable for those errors and feel comfortable context switching to figure out why those errors are occurring and to work towards fixing them, versus taking kind of the classic proactive approach of we wait until something has happened to a critical mass of users, and that's really the only time at which we start fixing our bugs. So this is how the alerting and workflow engine can help you with that. So we've got a few minutes left. I was able to kind of cover all of the different topics that I was hoping to. We were able to talk through some of the strategies that we see, some of the pains that we see, and walk you through a demo of how that can be accomplished in Bugsnag. With the last few minutes, my colleague Rusty and I will be in the chat. We're happy to answer whatever questions you may have for us. And if you have questions, I'll make sure to share them out loud so we can figure out if those are relevant to all of the folks in the session. So that's a good question from Rusty. I think we mentioned specifically the Jira integration, but we support a large number of different issue tracker integrations. So really whatever you're using, we should integrate well with. The most common thing that I'm seeing now is that there are different boards for different teams. So even if you're working, again, let's just use the e-commerce use case, you have folks who are focused on search, you have folks who are focused on checkout, and folks who are focused on cart activity or the shopping cart in general. And they may not share the same Jira board. They may even have, product managers for each one of those portions of their application. So being able to create Jira tickets for the respective boards is something that I think is a big improvement to how Bugsnag worked in the past and to how a lot of other vendors in the space work, because you're able to not only create the tickets from Bugsnag, but if you wanted to automate creation based on where errors happened, you could do that as well. So that's one of the trends that I'm seeing, Rusty, is that the workflow is having multiple issue trackers integrated and making sure that you're able to create tickets for the right groups of people, rather than sending them all to like a kind of a proxy that then gets moved somewhere else. Good question. Thanks, Rusty. So Brad has a question. Brad's asking if you can tie this back to code ownership, and whether the premise is that teams will be incented to produce healthier code if they're directly receiving alerts. So we have a couple of different ways that you can, with what we indexed already, kind of define ownership, whether that be like file name or package name. We also have customers who have some elegant approaches to invoking some of the callbacks that we offer. So at runtime, they maybe make like a web service call to figure out who owns a specific file and then attach ownership information that way. And then to your point, Brad, that's being directly routed to the right people. They have dashboards in Bugsnag that specifically show just the errors that they're responsible for. And it helps them understand, when they look at their stability, if their bookmark or their dashboard has the highest number of users impacted and the highest number of errors, that's something that they're going to want to improve because it's something that's highly visible to everybody in the organization. Great. Well, I appreciate everybody joining. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and we hope to see you in the booth. Thank you, everybody.